This portion of the memoir is called Ode to Charlie Garner. Before I start, I wanted to make sure that I published this on the 9th anniversary of his death, as he died February 13th, 2016. And let's jump right into what I wrote about this. Of all the pages I've written for this memoir, this one is probably the hardest and most painful. So I'm going to jump into how I met him, the friendship that blossomed, and the tragedy that seismically shifted my life and whole trajectory. I met one of his friends at Green Room in Kansas City, and his friend and I would chat on Snapchat. Straight guy, I assume, sharing memes and humor. I was invited to go to the jazz bar with him and two other guys. One of them was Charlie. When he arrived, he seemed quiet, but his energy field and aura was quite the opposite. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and khaki shorts, from what I recalled. He had the most epic beard to go with it. The conversation was very bro banter, and his comments came out that he was quite the ladies' man and had the alpha spirit to back it up. I remember more about the crude banter back and forth, in parentheses, his comment on a lady's legs, for example, parentheses, than my other friend's conversation or the performances. After that night, Charlie found me on Facebook when I used to have social media. Over the next several months, he and I conversed from conversations that were heated debates, being bratty to each other, to hysterical memes and inside jokes. In that time in KC, I felt very isolated, and the conversations with him kept me going. One such conversation is the most significant for this 1,000 words. In this conversation, I did not know that he was thinking about off-grid/intentional community living, and he didn't know it was my vision. His version was converting a boat into a living vessel in international waters, where a ship is considered an autonomous territory. He did his research on this. Mine was related to being near Flagstaff, Arizona, as the landscape Sunset Crater in the Hopi Nation was the type of fire that made me feel alive with everything. He actually had people who wanted to invest, as he was excellent with networking since he had an entrepreneurial spirit. I was more of a planner, logistics person. The collaboration got serious enough that I started looking into properties to where I was considering putting a bid on a former horse farm 10 minutes outside of Flagstaff that could be off-grid, minus being on county water, with water rights for this farm. I was working with the realtor that was the ex-lover of my now ex-trans friend. He was going to come up in early March 2016 to hammer out the final details and was going to buy the property. Before I continue with what happens next, there is a separate detail that is very important. One day, I took the bus from my area down to River Market in Kansas City. I was not in the best place mentally and did not want to even go out, but needed produce for my week's meals I was preparing. Towards the back of the bus was this guy dressed like turn-of-the-century steampunk with a lady and a little girl. He looked like a person in the wrong place and time. I didn't say hi or anything as my energy felt wrong. Plus, I felt like they were a unit having an outing. I find out later that was his wife, and they were apparently trying to patch the relationship up. I asked Charlie about his experience in this realm, and he said he felt like he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He wished he was back in the early 1900s. He also liked to keep various parts of his life from interacting with each other. That trait is like every July 29th birthday person I've known, and all of them had untimely deaths. He and I had a conversation about whether I was going to put an offer on the place in Arizona and what the budget could look like. I pulled the trigger and put an offer in about 2 weeks before my last successful art show. The day of the art show will be something I will never forget. Every moment I was not doing things for this unique art show I was putting on, Charlie and I were having a very personal discussion. I didn't have context of why he was asking these questions, but he knew I had understanding from the few Burning Man events I went to that were at the, quote, polyamorous, unquote, camp. He was asking about whether someone could love emotionally more than one person, ethics, etc. I answered them the best that I could. The more interesting comment in the conversation was the following statement, quote, "You'll know if I die because after the art show, you'll have a hot ginger dude shove money down your pocket, accidentally touch your dick, become really embarrassed. He will say during that transaction, you made $375 off of metamorphosis," unquote. I replied, quote, "That's oddly specific," unquote, and laughed it off. This was the day of the art show. At the end of the art show, I thought I did not sell anything else. And my friend who owned the fitness collective, who is a ginger, did everything that Charlie said above 20 minutes after the end of my art show. I freaked out. I immediately checked social media and found out he died in a motorcycle wreck, something he loved. I was crushed. I also learned some things after his death about the context of the conversation. Yes, I was infatuated with him, but I saw him like a brother I never had. It has taken over 8 years to crawl out of the abyss I went in after his death. This photo is his ashes in a Chinese lantern that his widow sent me to retouch. At the time, I didn't have the tools to get this the way I envisioned it, but I now have this as the appropriate ode to Charlie, transcending into a new dimension. It is important to note that I have decided to feel comfortable about talking about this. 10% of the profits from this photo memoir will go to Charlie and Amanda's daughter, Anna Kai, for her education fund. I also need to track her down so I can get her the copy of the photo that is truly the final edit. I think that would be very good for her, as she has probably moved on from this untimely death and what she thought was going to be the repair of their marriage and them getting back together. And yeah, there were some conversations she and I had after the death that I don't feel comfortable sharing at this point. So I hope you all enjoy this, and I hope that this does Charlie justice in the afterlife.